So I think, yeah, there's two different ways to look at it, the outcome and the results after of Game 7 with the Leafs losing to the Panthers. So kind of what you said there, I think when you look at the result itself, I'm not really surprised. It's kind of a numb feeling. Like, you've seen it so many times. And I mean, people could talk about them winning as many games or more games than they've had in over 20 years. Like, all these conversations about the accomplishments of the Leafs, it's just tiring when to me, it's such a simple conversation. How did they perform? It was like, I was listening to Ryan Rishaug and Brian Hayes go at it like earlier today, and I was just thinking, I was like, the media and the market in Edmonton and Toronto right now is just so different. And even if Edmonton was to lose in the conference finals or lose in the cup final again, just like how those guys in Edmonton perform in big games versus how the guys in Toronto perform in big games is such a night and day situation right now. It's actually sad because, like, the Oilers could lose, and we know McDavid and Draisaitl are putting like 3 points per game, scoring big goals in big moments. And then the guys in Toronto who are making as much money, if not for Mitch Marner, who wants to make the most money in the National Hockey League, not showing up in any category in those big games. So it's one of those things, Brandon. And then I move past that into what we're watching right now. And I'm so far past making excuses for the Leafs. But when I talk about the NHL as a whole and what we could do as a sport and continue to grow this league, seeing this divisional format, and Jacob, I think we talked about it before the playoffs started or as they were going, like, seeing this format in the playoffs right now over and over and over again, and just now it's a complete fail in my eyes. Like, the Carolina Hurricanes, this is more of a conversation on, like, why do they keep making it to the conference finals to begin with? I don't know. Maybe they have the much easier path on the opposite side of the bracket, and then they keep getting swept in the conference finals. So maybe it's less about Carolina not being a great team, more about this divisional format is just flawed. Like, you have 3 of the best teams in the Eastern Conference every year on the same side of the bracket. You don't think that's a problem? Even last year, you could argue the top 4 teams in the Eastern Conference in terms of playoff pedigree or what they can do in the playoffs were on the one side of the bracket. So, honestly, Brandon, my frustration is less about, if Toronto was here, more about, we know that the Leafs star players didn't show up, but it doesn't help to see something that's such an easy fix in my eyes with the National Hockey League. I get why they did that. They wanted to up the Florida teams, they upped the smaller markets, get more rivalries in place. Now those Florida markets have been upped. Switch the format back so we can get the 2 best teams in the conference final when it matters.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. You know, I look at that conversation very similarly to how many look at the college football playoff conversation. And my overall take on it is you're going to have problems regardless. Like, no matter what format it is, someone's going to get screwed, and someone's going to get a matchup that is really unfavorable to them given their seeding. So I just don't think there's no real winning either way. And I think that, frankly, anyone who looks at that as excusing the Leafs consistently.
No, it's not at all.
matters. But I'm just saying, I don't want anyone to kind of get that confused. I'm with you that Carolina, this was, I hate to become like a Twitter troll, but it was a Mickey Mouse path to an Eastern Conference Finals. The Leafs have never had that, but it doesn't excuse the fact every single year underperforming Game 7. I do want to circle back to the point you made about the media and how we've heard all about, the quote-unquote noise coming from Toronto fans and the media and how the players have had such a difficult time dealing with that. Well, it looks as if Mitch Marner will be gone. We don't know about John Tavares. I personally think Austin Matthews and William Nylander both do a pretty good job overall handling the media. I know it hasn't resulted for Matthews yet in postseason, playoff productivity yet, but in terms of guys that are out there in free agency, in terms of possible replacements, who do you think is really emblematic of a player that would fit in well, would be able to deal with the media, and would just be a good, fit for getting this Leafs team back over the hump?
Yeah, no, you made some great points. There's a couple guys I consider, and just to bounce off what you said in terms of, we don't know Marner's future as we're recording. We don't know, just talking about Tavares. I think he stays. I honestly think Tavares stays, but where you're going with the Matthews and Nylander conversation, and Jacob, Brandon, I'm not trying to stir things up. I've talked about it a couple times on my channel, but the one thing that I've heard kind of whispers about is what would the dynamic be about with Austin Matthews and William Nylander as just the 2 guys in Toronto. It's kind of been public that Matthews and Marner are really close friends. You just see that vibe sometimes behind the scenes, as well as Ryan Reeves has made a couple comments in the media about cliques cliques in that dressing room, kind of trying to break up cliques in that environment. And it just makes me wonder, is the Matthews and Marner combination a little bit of a package deal sometimes, and Nylander's on the out of that? I'm not trying to cause a major stir, but I've heard some whispers in that regard. So my big question is, the conversation, Marner leaves, Matthews and Nylander behind the scenes with Craig Berube, Brad Treliving, upper management in the Leafs organization. Can those two guys coexist as the number 1 and 2 guys in Toronto and build something? Because it needs to be a clear answer. If those two guys don't think they can win in Toronto together, then they need to have a real conversation about who maybe should step out and if it's all guys should step out. To answer your question about guys maybe they could seek in terms of a fit, free agency, one guy I would be really interested to see if they could go aggressive at is a guy like Brock Besser. I just see his demeanor. He feels like a little bit more of a mature mindset. He's a scorer. I feel like Jacob Brandon, the Leafs could use a couple extra goals in big games, maybe here and there. So, I mean, that might not just be me, but I think Besser is a guy I would look at. If they do bring back Tavares, I'd be interested about a guy like Brock Nelson. I've had those two Minnesota natives maybe going back home, but Brock Nelson played with John Tavares on Long Island, so maybe there's a fit there. It could actually shift Tavares to the wing as well. We know Tavares' speed has been a bit of a conversation in the last couple of years, so maybe Brock Nelson could fill that role. I also think the big conversation is the Leafs paid a lot for Scott Laughton at the deadline, a first-round pick in Grebenkin. Do they feel he can be that third-line center? Because when it came down to it, Craig Berube didn't feel that confidence, and he fell back to the fourth line pretty quickly. So that's another conversation the Leafs need to have. I think they need to strengthen that center depth because at the end of the day, the defense is locked in, the goaltending's locked in. I think you target a couple guys that could either fill that center role or that scoring in that top six because you basically have to fill it out what you're losing with Marner, but at the same time, you weren't getting those big goals from Marner anyways in big games, so it's kind of a wash until you add that big piece.
John, wanted to ask you about guys that were